Hello, everybody. Welcome to our workshop today on the NITRO Workflow Designer interface. My name is James Recibo from concatenation Software. Thank you for joining. I see a couple return attendees. I appreciate you guys coming back and wanting to learn a little bit more about the Workflow Designer. So what we're going to work through today is the setup of a workflow using this Workflow Designer tool, which I think makes it really easy to kind of develop your workflows, makes it easy to see where things are going, and even expand and add into that. You'll see how it goes as we go through it, and how that all works. Couple housekeeping items. There is a questions box on the GoToWebinar panel if you're having a question at any point in time, or comment, or you can't see the screen, can't hear me, whatever the case may be. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them in that questions box. I'll keep my eye on it, and we'll get to it as we go through here. So before we get into the workflow piece of it, and it looks like we have some people joining late, but good. Thanks for coming. Before we get into the workflow piece of it, I kind of want to set the stage here for what I'm trying to build, and that'll help you understand where I'm going with this. Also, if you have any questions on how you build a particular thing in the workflows, or you see you have something slightly similar but slightly different that you want to try to incorporate, again, let me know in the questions. I'll try to address that during the course of the webinar. If I don't get to it before the end of the time, we'll follow up with you afterwards, of course. So again, so feel free to put it in there, but I do want to set the stage a little bit, and you should be seeing my screen, SharePoint page, new visual workflow designer. If you don't see that, let me know, but it looks like that's the screen I'm sharing, so if you have any question or trouble with that, let me know. Anyway, so what we're working on here is essentially a request list. And on this request list, we have a couple different types of requests coming through. They could be internal requests, they could be external requests. And what we're going to do with our workflow on this request list is to set up an approval process. Now, this is going to be a fairly simple one. It's going to be straightforward one level, but I'm going to show you some neat tips and tricks to kind of show, get some information in different ways as part of the workflow process. Also, how to set things up using variables and query list actions, and also how to use the gateways to help drive which way your workflow is going. So hopefully all that stuff will be helpful to you in developing your own workflows with NITRO Studio. So again, it's just an example how to set things up, but certainly if this could mirror a real life example you have, or it could be, if it was some minor tweaks, I think we can make it match whatever you need. But so essentially we have this request list over here where requests are coming in, and we need to send out some kind of approval process. Now, a really simple way to do this is to create an approver field on the request list itself, and we can do that using NITRO Forms. Of course, NITRO Forms being an integral part of the whole NITRO Studio experience. This is tied in very closely with what you can do with workflows and custom actions and whatnot. Again, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you today could actually be done with custom actions as well. So if you wanted to use that instead of workflows, that could work for you. But I do want to show you from the workflow side. So essentially you have your list here, your form, and if you wanted to just simply capture an approver and send a notification that way, we could do that. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. So we can create an approver field on the form, a person or group field, because there'll be someone internal to the organization. And we're going to not add it to default view, just go ahead and add this to the list, pull it up over here, and pop it onto the form. Now we can put it anywhere we want. I'm just going to put it right at the top here so you can see it right here. And then we can publish that. When we're ready, save and or publish. And then now what we can do is go over to our workflow side of things. So what I've done, I've already kind of started this workflow coming from the request list, but if you wanted to get there, what you would do is, let's see, go to NITRO Apps. And I've set up a lot of things ahead of time. I'll show you which things I've set up ahead of time so that you can kind of understand where this is going. One of the things is a approver task list, but I'll show you that in just a minute. So click on workflows, it pops this open, and then we just go to new workflow. We select our list, which is the requests list. and designer. And we can do it when an item is created. So that's when we're going to kick this off. When an item is added to the list, we're going to, on this list here, we're going to initiate this workflow. And that gets me to the same place I was basically over here. New workflow. I'm just gonna use this one instead because I think it's probably gonna work better. So anyway, so we create this new workflow, and so what we've done, we've added that approver field onto our request form. So I'm gonna pop back over to the workflows, and we can create one simple action to create an item. Now, where are we going to create that item? Well, we're going to do it in an approver task list. So that's one of the things I did ahead of time is I created this approver tasks list over here. You can see it right here. It's just basic SharePoint list. And essentially gets it creates a task for that approver so that they can go and then make a decision on it. Now you could also, if you wanted to, put a choice field on your form over here to say approved or denied, and through permissions you could make sure that only the approver is the one who can make that decision. That's again another simple way to do it, but that would be doing something through the forms interface, not so much the workflow. So we're focusing on workflows today, but there's another option as well to keep it really simple. So we're going to create this item. I'm going to open up the settings. We're going to call it like add approver task. And we're going to select our site, which we already have selected up here. We're going to select our list, which happens to be right at the top. And we're going to maybe map a few things. We'll do a column mapping and say, here's the assign to, that's going to be the approver from the form. So here you have the approver from the form. We can just double click that. That becomes column value here. Hit update. So now we have that mapping between the assign to and the approver. We could do due date if we wanted to, have it be a certain number of days from today. We could do a today function, or we could use the add function and use that today. I'm just going to do cut and paste today, and then we could do a number of hours or days or hours, like 2 days, like this. Yeah, like that. So it'd be add 2 days. Now that due date is 2 days from today to get that approver task done. Of course, it could be 1 day, it could be 4 hours. So we could do 1 day. We could do 4 hours instead of 1 day, that kind of thing. So you got some control over that. So you have a due date that's due in 4 hours from when it gets created. And we could create other mappings like that. So yeah, task name. We could also, build that out to be, something like, let's see, string cat. Let's see, created by, and we can put another thing here is asking for something for an item. So that becomes our title, task name, etc. So we can put that in there. And so you got that mapping as well. So that's going to create your task. I'll just leave it at that. We can add other things as we go here, but essentially that's all, so now we have a simple workflow. So we go create an item, and we're going to add that approver task based on who the approver is. Really, really straightforward, right? So that's one way we can do it and keep it really simple, but we're going to, obviously we're going to make this more complex, because if this was all I was showing you today, it wouldn't be very much and wouldn't be very impressive. So we're going to take it a step further. So if you look back at our form and I open up the new form here, one thing you'll notice is that I have the internal versus external flag. Now I did that because we might have a request coming in from someone on staff who needs a new laptop, or maybe there's someone in the field who needs, external customer who needs some kind of report or whatever it is. So we got these two types of requests coming through, internal and external. Of course, there could be more, but we're going to start with those. And so if it's an internal person, we can choose the requester from Active Directory. If it's an external person, we're going to choose the company and the requester who's going to be from that company. So we got this drop down here. We can go and pull who the requester is that's associated to the company itself. So we choose someone else. You can see it resets it, and we have to choose a different person, like that. So we got the internal request and the external request. Now, what does that mean from an approval process standpoint? So the way I have this set up right now is they actually go through different approval processes based on whether it's an internal or an external request, right? So we're going to have a different grouping or different process for each one of those. Now it's going to be similar, but it's going to look slightly different, right? So we have, come back over to my site contents. We have this company list. If we choose the company list, there might be an approver that, this is where again the names. Let's see where I have that, those approver definitions. I know that I have them in here somewhere. Just set them up. Departments here. Yeah, here's where you're getting your internal approvers, right? So we're mapping the department the person is a part of, and whoever the requester is, and we're going to pull the approver there. And then from the contacts, I have it in here somewhere. Look at site contents again. Request emails, company contact. Yeah, so we have it based on, I have it based on company, who the approver is. I think if we look at the company list, yeah, we have it over here listed as who the approver is. That's where it is. Okay. So the departments list and the company list, one's for the internal users, one for the external. Anyway, so we create these tables, and now what we can do with our workflow is go and actually query the table, query the list, and get the information we need. So now, instead of using this approver field here on the form, I'll just get rid of that and publish this. And so now we don't need it because we're going to use what we call a query list. Now, the other thing we need to do is create some kind of branching here. So because we have two different ways we're going to go. We're going to query the departments list, or we're going to query the company list. One of those two things. And the way we can do that in the workflow is to use what we call gateways. And so the gateway, we can pull that in here, and it's got to have two nodes. You see all throughout the workflow designer, you're going to get these error messages or notifications that say something's wrong, something's not working, or something's not configured correctly. And that gives you a good clue into how to design this in a way that's going to work. So what we need to do is we actually need to create two of these query list actions. Now again, one's going to go to our departments list, and one is going to go to our company list. So create those two. And let me get rid of this label here. And when you're working with the designer, you can always move things around like this, which is pretty nice. So you can kind of recenter it, make it look a little, closer to centered, kind of even things out if you want. But then you also you can hit on top of, you just left click on top of the action. You'll get all these different actions. These are all the different, correspond to all the different icons over here. But the main one we want to focus on right now is this connector. So we're going to connect over one way here, and we're going to connect over one way here. And so that gives me my two labels. Now one was going to be internal, one was going to be external. So I'm just going to label 2 internal, and I'm going to label 2 external. And then within external, oh, there we go. Okay, so now let me spread those out a little bit more so it's a little more visible. Okay, make this a little bigger, make that a little bigger, whatever you want to do. Okay, so then how do we set it up? Well, we already know from our NITRO form over here, we have a request type, internal versus external. So that's how we're going to flag it to go which direction, how we tell it which direction to go, right? So if we come in here, we can set it up to go to the gateway. So we're going to call the gateway, I don't know, check which type of request it is. And this doesn't really, you can put whatever you want here, basically. It's just a way for you to remember what it was they have set up. And then to drive your gateway, you have these conditions. So we add a condition, we add that request type, request type, there it is, equals, then we can do, if the conditions are matched, it goes to internal, conditions aren't matched, it goes to external. So we could do, let's do it this way. Internal, there we go. So if request type equals internal, then we're going to send it on the internal route. If the request type equals external, that's the, basically the opposite, we'll just send it that way. So this is where you can get your gateways going. Now, if you wanted to have more than 2 conditions, right? So this is kind of either or. It's either internal or it's not. And unfortunately, that matches up with our setup. We have internal and external, and those are the 2 options. But if you have a third option, you could do it with an additional gateway. And so basically we say, is it internal or not? yes, it's internal, let's go this way. If it's not internal, so which we would call that probably not internal, it would go a different way. And then we'd have another gateway that would do a second check, right? So we could definitely put multiple gateways in here and say, okay, well, now it's going down this route. And, you know, I just, I didn't have a great example for this. Let me just go ahead and configure something that kind of looks okay. So instead of, now internal goes this way, not internal goes this way, and then it does a second check. Okay, is it, whatever it is, maybe there's some other check you have to make on the external ones that before you decide which way you're going to go with this. So you can have a gateway cascade into a gateway, and then you can cascade into a gateway. So that's another way to do it with the gateways, is if you have multiple conditions, you could set those up. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Of course, if you have any of these that you don't want, you can just click on it. You'll get a little trash can there, and you can get rid of it. Then we got to add our connector back in. No big deal. Just go with that. So you reset the label. That's okay. We can just go and change that back. External. All right. And the nice thing, you notice I might kind of move these labels around wherever they go. So whatever makes sense. If you start getting overlapping arrows and you need to control where those go, that makes it nice to kind of see where things are. So now we have these. I'll get rid of this here because this is useless. So now we have these, and they can go into the same action down here, essentially, where you could go say, okay, we're going to, here's another nice thing, is you can move these arrows around like that. It really gets, you really see where things go. Move it like that. I think because I deleted that label, I just have to reset it here, hit okay. See that one's good, but of course these aren't configured yet, so you get those little arrow, these message box. The nice thing about the message box too is when you hover over it, it tells you, usually it tells you exactly what's going on, right? So it says, please configure action node settings. Now, if I remove this, it might, yeah, it still says that, but let me go ahead and do this. Let me configure it. And if you're not familiar with how to set up query lists, I'll walk through that. It's really straightforward. It's basically saying what list do we want to point it towards, and what information do we want to get from that list. So we're going to do like QL. Let's see what I call it. I have my cheat sheet over here on the other screen. Just give me a second to pull that up. QL get approvers internal. Okay, so I have it like that. So it's a little long, but that's okay. This is actually important. So this now, it's, in contrast with the gateway name, the action name here, and in other action names other than the gateways, it actually is kind of important to know what that action name is, because we are going to use that later on in the process, and I'll show you as we go through. So we got that QL get approvers internal. We always just kind of our internal, concatenation thing. We always say QL for query list, and we usually don't use spaces, but you can do it however you want. And then what are we going to get from that list? So we want to get approvers internal. Then you have two different types of things. You can either pull back one item or multiple items. In this case, we only want one approver, and that's not going to be a collection, right? So we're not going to use this item collection option, although that's there if you wanted to take an action on multiple items. Like the example I like to use is if you're running a help desk ticketing system, and you want to close out multiple tasks at one time, you can do an item collection and say, get all the, I'm closing out this ticket, get all the tasks that are still open for this ticket and close them out. So we do an item collection to go query that list of open tasks, pull that back into the workflow, and that's going to then close out all those, the updated item action to close them all out. But in this case, we're just going to stick to item. And then where we get that information from. So we already looked at our departments list and company list. So we're going to go to departments on this one. That's our internal, because we're doing the Get Improvers internal. And then how do we get that information? Well, we want it to match up to the some information on the form itself. In this case, we're on our NITRO form. You see we have the requester department right here, which matches up with those departments that we have in the departments list. So we're going to map that, make that condition a part of the conditions. And so if we come back over here to workflows, we're going to use a query builder. This is the most common one I use. You can also use list views, that helps as well. Related items is a good one too. Mostly I'm using query builder to get the information, just because you can directly say, I want to get this, that equals that, and yada, yada, yada. Now we do have a dynamic field here. So we're not saying title equals X, right? We can say title equals active. That's one way to do it. But if we have a dynamic field, like a placeholder, we use these percentages. And here, let me just show you what that looks like. We're going to pull in this over here. And let me just give me a second here to create a new notepad. I'll show you what that looks like in full. New window over here. So it looks like this. So we have that %%, and then we have our column placeholder. So you see this throughout workflows and custom actions where you have the external name, which basically the name you see on the form, the name you see on the when you go to drag and drop that column onto a list or onto a form, you'll see that external name there, we call it. And then you have the internal name, which is the internal SharePoint reference for that same field. And you see it doesn't like spaces when you do the internal name, so it covers that over with this, kind of HTML text there. So anyway, that's the internal, external, external, internal, display name, internal name, D before I, and the alphabets. That's how I like to remember it, display and then internal. And then you put these percent signs around it, and that tells the system, tells Nitro, this is a placeholder. We're not directly saying that, title has to equal this. We're just saying title has to equal this field that's on our request list. So we got that in there. The reason I want to pull that out, you see this is a little tight, but that's okay. And then we go to, let's see, what do we do next? We get the approver, right? So now we have to get the approver, and we're going to use this variable. But I didn't create a variable yet, so I'll go do that now. But you basically want to get that approver name from that department list. So we're getting the requested department that matches up with the form, and the item being submitted. Now we need to get who that approver is. And the nice thing we can do about it is you can use these variables. So we're going to create a variable called approver, and we're going to leave it blank. So it's just a kind of a placeholder, a place where we can put our information, hit OK. Now we got our variable. Now we can come back to our query list, and we can add this variable mapping, which is we're going to select our variable called approver, which we just created. And you can see I've done this before. You get QL get approvers internal. So this is where that name comes into play, right? So we're referencing this action, and we're saying, okay, from this action, the information you got, get the approver field from that item that you pulled back. And that's what we're telling it here. And that's what this hash means. Like, get that information from this list here. We're pointing this to a list here. We're going to get the approver from that list over here, and we're going to get it from that item that matches up the requested department. So it's actually pretty slick because it lets you kind of dig in, and so I can kind of do like a, what is that, index match kind of thing they do, or VLOOKUP kind of situation in Excel where we're saying, okay, show me the line in the table of department where title equals the requester department, and then get me the approver from that match that shows up. It's kind of like an index match in Excel. If you've never used it, it's actually a really cool feature, and that's basically what this is doing. So we save that. And so then we can use that later on in our add approver task. Because right now we have our add approver task set up to get the information from our assigned to on the from the approver field, sorry, on the request list. But we just deleted that field, so that doesn't exist anymore. So we have to edit. Excuse me. Pardon me. So we have to edit that now and get the assigned to from somewhere else. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that variable we just created, and we're going to just make sure I get the map, yeah, that's just a simple one. Okay, so do approver, so that's our variable, hash value. That's it. That's how we get the value of that variable and map it into a field. So now we got approver hash value, and that's going to go to the assigned to. So now it doesn't matter which approver we get. It's going to be dynamic, and we can update that. Now we've got that. We're going to keep these other two things the same, and we're going to hit save. So now we've got that internal. And the nice thing about it, the way this is set up right now, we don't have to worry about changing anything over here for the approver task, because we can go into this external approvers and basically do the same thing. So we're going to do is a QL get approvers external, I bet it is. Let me just pull up my cheat sheet over here. Yep, okay. QL get, yeah, external, perfect. We're gonna do the item, and I'm just gonna whip through this because we've done this before, but in this case, we're gonna choose company, right? So we're gonna do company instead of lookup. And actually, this is gonna be a little different. We're gonna do company instead of department, and it's gonna be a little different because we're gonna use the lookup column instead of the query builder. And it's because that on the form over here, go back to our NITRO form, requester department is a single line of text field from the internal user, but requester company is the lookup field. So we can directly use that lookup to make the connection between the query that we're doing and the information we want to get back. So we're going to do lookup. We got that requester company lookup. That's going to be pulling back our one item. And then we're going to do the same thing with the variable mapping down here. Approver, get approvers external, same idea. We're going to, from this action name, we're going to get the approver from that request, from the company, and map it to the approver variable. And now we don't even have to change anything about this add approver task. Dynamically, it's going to say, oh, it's an internal request, get the approver, add that name to the approver task. It's an external request, get that name over here and add it to the approver task. So it doesn't matter which direction it goes in. The variable is the same on here, right? So it doesn't, it's going to pull whichever direction it goes, it's going to get that value into the approver field. Right, so then, so we might want to add a few other things in here. So let's see what we have on the, a couple other variables that we might want to pull in here. And we might want to do something with the task name. So right now the task name is just going to be this string cat, and that's fine. But let's say we want to do something a little like slicker with, deciding what that message should be. Maybe the task name should be different based on whether it's an internal or external approval. So now we have to make this. Now we have to change this, and that's fine. So then we have this. Was it set variable action? Set variable. Where is it? It's here. Set. There it is. Set variable. So now we can set a variable, and well, of course, to set a variable, we have to create a variable. So let me just go ahead and create the other two variables that we need here. We need a new variable called message. We have a variable called requester, and we're gonna add a variable called company. We'll use these in different ways. Right. Okay. So we got our variables like that, and we're going to, on this side, we're going to change what that task name is by setting these different variables. So we're going to say that requester variable, set requester, is going to be, and this is a fairly complicated setup. We're getting the user property name. It's using a function essentially. So we got this get sp user property, get the name from that requester field. Instead of the email, essentially you could pull, by default it pulls the email, but we want to get the person's name instead. So we can pull that into our requester and do that. Then we're going to set another variable here. And this one's going to be to set the a message, and set message, and add our mapping. And now that variable of message, we're going to put a string cat in here. So now you'll see what we're doing here is that we're concatenating our information. So we got, this is an internal request meant for the requester. So we got the internal request meant for space requester value. So again, we're doing that variable, getting the variable value from there. Hit OK on that. Hit OK on that. So now we got to use that and put that in our approver task. And that's going to look like this. Because really all we need, this variable sets the requester, this sets that requester into the message. And now all we need to do here actually is take that task name and do message value. That's it, right? So we built that message kind of dynamically. and we're putting it into our task name. So it could call task name or something else. It probably would make a little more sense, but I use message. That's fine. And that can be included in email as well. So if you wanted to send a notification as part of this process, you could have that message. Now, similarly, on the external side, we're going to do the same kind of idea. We're going to set a variable of company instead of requester. I'm going to do set company, pattern mapping. We're going to choose that company. And this is going to look like this. So we're going to get the title of the company. We're going to hit OK. Then we're going to do something similar with the message where we set the message over here. Set message. And kind of the same thing. We're going to do a string concatenation over here. So now we got the company variable, which we just used. Now we've got the message. And again, since I've already set it up on the other side and did my, kind of mirrored things, it's not going to change anything. So whether it went down this route or this route, that message is the same, or it's going to be different based it is, but the variable is going to be the same, and we can use that here. And it doesn't matter which route it goes down. It's going to use approver. It's going to use message. Either one of those values is going to be set appropriately, and it's going to work. Now the final complication, I guess you could say, I want to put into this is what if that approver is blank, right? So what if we forgot to set the approver? Like you can see over here in my companies list. Let's see, it's on my companies list, I left it blank. Maybe there doesn't need to be approver for adventure work cycles in Boston, Massachusetts. They don't need approval. They're just going to get whatever they need no matter what. So what do we do then? Well, we want to create now another kind of gateway to drive whether we want to create an approval task or not. So now in this case, we're going to say in some cases we create that task, in some cases we don't. And we need to dynamically decide when that's going to happen. So again, we do that through a gateway. And what we do there is now we have to run another kind of check here. And one thing you can do with the variables is you can set a value here. So I'm going to set a value of 0 to my approver variable. And essentially what this means is this is the default value, so it's going to run through the workflow. The value of approver is always going to be 0 until or unless it gets changed. And that's, as we know, that's going to get changed by pulling the approver value from the internal list or the approval value from the external list. But like we just saw, maybe the company doesn't have a value for the approver. Well, now it's going to remain 0. And that's how we're going to know. If that remains 0, it means we didn't find an approver. So now we have to run a check to see, do we want to create this approval task or not? And so what we're going to do is set this gateway up to have 2 different nodes. And so we're going to, so I'm going to have one direction over here, which creates that approval task. I'm just going to delete this thing here. I'll delete that here just for completeness sake. You see now I get all my error messages come back up and it says invalid flow. It doesn't connect to an end node. So you see how that message changes. It's pretty cool that you can see that it's going to change based on what's happening, what's the problem. Right now there's no incoming connections. Well, there's no outgoing connections either. There's lots of problems here. So we got to see what we're going to do here. And then so we got have it go one way or the other. We don't have to set it up right away, but I am going to do this update item action over here, which I'll configure in just a minute. But essentially want that to be, want to create those two directions. So again, a little off the screen, I can just go ahead and move the screen a little bit. Get one over here, maybe change this around a little bit. Get one over here. Change this around a little bit, move the label, try and make it as symmetrical as possible. It's just me. Maybe it's just OCD. I like having it symmetrical. It's pretty nice. Label 2 jumped up there. What are you doing? Come back here. Okay, so again, we're going to have a check, and then of course we have to have an incoming node, and we can actually have multiple incoming nodes here, right? So we can have this set message coming into the gateway. We can have this set message coming into the gateway, and they're both going to do the same thing. So they're both going to run a check, and they're both going to hit this gateway, and they're going to run a check to say, is approver in this case, we're going to say, is approver value 0 or not? So this is where we're going to use an advanced condition. So we're going to check if approver has value. And we're going to use a condition. This is an advanced condition. So it's a little bit, no, where is the advanced condition? Oh, there it is at the bottom. Okay, advanced condition equals the approver value. So again, that variable value, hash value, 0. All right, so what's going on here? So this is an advanced condition. Basically what that means is that we can take a, how else are we going to get this approver information? It's not in the list over here. The only thing in this list over here is going to be column values from the field, from the form we're working on, which is that requester field, right? Essentially, whatever you put here, in this field here is what these two commas are representing, right? So we're saying the approver variable value equals 0. So if the condition is that the approver variable value equals 0, then we're going to send it in one direction. We call it label 1. I'll call it label 1 for now and label 2. And I'll make those changes. But with the advanced condition, it's kind of cool because you can basically take any variable or any you could put a string in here. You could put a function in here if you needed to. You can do those do those kind of comparisons that are not directly possible by selecting a column from the list. So it expands what you can do with the workflows. It's pretty cool. So basically, we're just checking, does this value still equal 0 or not? Yes or no. If it does, we're going to go one way. If it doesn't, we're going to go the other. Now we can come back over here and change our labels to say different things. So we're going to do approver is not blank. And approver is blank. All right, now we can make sure those are, actually, so I want to do it the other way. Approver is blank, approver is not blank. So that's always good to label those. We want to make sure those labels have a valid names on them, and you can see it's easy to just change them around, right? So approver is blank. If the conditions are matched, it means the approver is blank. That means it is never found. And then the approver is not blank, which means we do have an approver, and we do want to go this way, right? So you have those two different options. I create my node here. You say I still haven't configured this update list item action. And all I really want to do here is say, update the form and say approval is not required. So that's all we're going to do here. This will come up. Oh, everything just went really slow on me. Can you guys still hear me? Hopefully. All right, it's coming back. There we go. Okay. Removal not required. And let's see, we'll do add column mappings, and we're going to, there's a status on here, approval, it's a status field. So there's a status field on here that I, oh, it's up here actually. Here, I'm going to do the status is going to be approval not required. Now, of course, I want to make sure this matches up with my option on the list, but I can always go check that and say, approver task, let's see, where is it? ID information, status, here it is. So if I edit that, I don't have it in here. So approval not required. So you put that in there as a status. Okay, on that, come back to my workflow, make sure it matches, do copy and paste, and update. And now we're just going to update our form to say approval is not required, and then we're going to go to the end state. So, a fairly, somewhat complex workflow, nothing too crazy. Hopefully nothing too wild, but I mean, this is how you build out kind of dynamically build out the workflow. Like I said, taking back to the beginning, we started with just creating the approver task based on what we put in the approver field, very simply. Or, now we've gone something a little more complex, and whether it take us 40 minutes to build, I mean, it's really not that, far off to get these fairly complex workflows. And we can take it even a step further and do more with it. So we want to send emails. We don't even have that in here yet. Right? We want to notify the requester that the email came through, and again, so we're gonna maybe have that on the different nodes. So we could say, send mail over here, and then send mail over here. So we have different, kind of two different mail templates because we have a different requester field or external field. So in this case, you probably want to have two different templates. But again, you can kind of like expand things out. There's different controls over here to kind of select things. So we got this lasso control, which is kind of neat. You can kind of highlight all this stuff, move it all at once, so you don't have to go and like move each thing individually. Give us a little more space, right? Give us a little more room, to build it out. So we got these little, kind of little tips and tricks like that. There's you can add space. So again, same idea as just moving everything below the line down, moving everything. Yes, moving everything over to the left. So different things like that can help us, help you build out your workflow so that you can kind of make it look the way you want it to look, give it more space, kind of see where things are, and then move around these arrows to make it look easy easy to follow the flow essentially. So yeah, if you guys have any, kind of specific needs with workflows they're struggling with, or kind of process that you want to build out, feel free to pop those into the comments or the questions box, and we can take a look at it, maybe address those concerns, or maybe if you have a question about what a certain action does or what a certain control does on here, happy to answer those questions at this time if you have any. Otherwise, I think we can. I think it's pretty much what I wanted to cover. Is building out this kind of somewhat, not super complicated, but a somewhat complicated workflow with a few complicated, a little more advanced features, I guess you could say, like with the query list and the variables and whatnot. It's really not that difficult once you kind of wrap your head around it and understand what everything's doing. But I understand it could be a little daunting up front. So that's why I like to get on these workshops like this and really try to explain what these things are doing, so that you can take that information, go and build your own workflows and do your own, management of the NITRO workflow process. So with that, I do appreciate it. I do want to point out there are a couple of upcoming workshops, upcoming webinars that we have. We're doing this NITRO Workflow Designer one right now. We're going to be talking in the next one about this Teams app with Help Desk. So Teams app is a way to interact with a knowledge base and interact with our ticketing system that you don't have to directly go through SharePoint to do it. You can do it through Teams instead. There's a couple different ways you can do that. I'll show how you can interact with what we have we call it bot or Teams app. It's kind of the same idea. You converse with something or some automated system to look up knowledge base articles. You can converse with, you could pull up tickets. You could create tickets from there. That's what the Teams app's going to do. And there's also some ways you can integrate the SharePoint pages themselves into Teams, so you can kind of see what that looks like. Then from a webinar perspective, we've got this Modernize Your Business Process using Microsoft 365 and Teams, and that's coming up next week, a week from tomorrow. So that's another good webinar to take a look at, kind of show what we're doing to help modernize these processes. And that's part of what I was showing you today. How do you kind of move this approval process into a automated process where we got determination of whether it's internal, external. You can make further determinations. Is it this department, that department? Is it, if there's a price around it, maybe there's some approval based on pricing. So that kind of modernization you can do with NITRO workflows, and this is kind of dig into that a little bit more next week. But yeah, I appreciate everyone coming on to the webinar workshop today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next go around. So hope everyone has a great day. Thank you for joining.